Alright, well, I just got finished building this vivarium for my little leopard gecko colony yesterday, so I thought I'd make a quick video showing it off. Like I said, it's a planted vivarium as opposed to just a normal terrarium, which means, you know, there are live plants in here. What I see a lot of people do with leopard gecko setups is they build a setup sort of mimicking more of a desert biome, and you see a lot of sort of, you know, red sandstone, that sort of thing, really arid sort of setups, which, you know, given that you have complete control over what goes on inside your terrariums, is not a problem for the health of the geckos, but it does, I think, fail to mimic sort of what they or how you would encounter them in a natural environment and the sort of biomes that they would typically inhabit. So I tried to do something a little bit more natural for them, something that would, you know, closely mimic their natural range. And so, you know, without having seen them in the wild, this is my interpretation of it. It's probably just as inaccurate as the sandstone setups, but this is how I imagine them living in the wild anyhow. Yeah, so it's just some calyx grasses and then a couple succulents planted in there for them, and they're all recessed into this substrate, which is you know, the sort of expanding insulation foam that you typically see. It's not great stuff. I live in New Zealand right now, so I can't remember what brand they have. They basically have substitutes for everything that we'd have in the States, but you know, different companies, different brands. Still quality products. I had no issues with this. I think whatever insulating foam you can get will be pretty comparable to great stuff. So it cures inert and all that. And again, blocking off so you don't see the foam. It's just black silicone, just to make it a little bit more visually pleasing. You know, have some driftwood and rocks that I had put in here. And so what I did for the actual bottom is do the great stuff with a couple little tricks, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, then painted it with basically masonry, you know, concrete sealer paint, which is acrylic based and dries completely inert and harmless as well. And then colored that with your run-of-the-mill acrylic paints. I was sort of, you got to choose something that, you know, like a theme. So I was thinking go for a little, you know, not obnoxiously so, but a little bit of slight pink purpley to it, like sort of Arcos clay sort of environment anyhow, and then sprinkled sand on top of the wet acrylic paint and let that dry on. So it's textured, it doesn't look obnoxiously shiny, which this sealer paint, even though it says it's matte, does have a sheen to it. So I really wanted to avoid that and put the sand on. And I think the combination of the sterilized play sand, which I was able to buy here, that had a lot of interesting sort of gray, black, and white inclusions in it, I think it turned out looking nice. I think it complements the shade of acrylic that's underneath it, and everything ended up looking pretty natural on its own. So I was saying tips and tricks. So basically I had to make it so that this, which you can see the fault line there, I didn't want it to be too obtrusive. You see a lot of people with false bottom hides or you know, their own hide setups where in order to access the hides you get these, you know, sort of like lines where you pull out and open up the hide and you see little plastic tubs in there. I wanted to avoid that, just to give it more continuity when you're looking at the whole thing, you know, especially from this angle, that fault disappears. But even if you're looking at it like, you know, the larger thing, it's not super obtrusive just having that one line there. It doesn't sort of visually alarm you. It doesn't give you so many visual breaks that it takes you out of that natural sort of feel. Yeah, so all that is to say that this is actually a false top. This succulent is planted in soil, a little pot that I rigged up, but is secured with a wooden dowel, which is actually how it was planted from the store in this little pot, and they had stuck a dowel into it to secure it into the soil to give the roots enough chance to dry. So I just left the dowel in there and did the exact same thing, tightly packed the soil in there, and then pushed the dowel in. And because of the way that the succulent's canopy works, you can remove this top without the soil spilling everywhere and causing issues that way, so that's quite good. And so I basically carved these burrows, which there are 4, which are entrances to 4 unique hides underneath, into the actual substrate, and painted it and sanded just like the rest of the deal. And so they lead into what is sectioned off as 4 individual hides: a wet and dry warm, and a wet and dry cool. There are going to be 4 geckos in here, so between sort of the natural cover and the hides, if they want a little privacy from each other, they can easily find their own space in this enclosure. And yeah, they're able to thermoregulate and all that good stuff. So what I am going to do, it's actually quite easy to remove the top in here with 2 hands, but with one holding the camera, it's quite difficult. So I'm just going to tip it up and then resume the video so you can see what's going on under the hood of this thing. All right, one second. Okay, so as you can see, you can sort of just tilt the top up from the bottom to look inside, and as I was mentioning about that succulent, it's pretty dang secure in there. You don't really have to worry about losing a lot of soil, which is great. You know, so far it's worked out. Again, I can't say for the long-term sustainability, because I did just plant this and finish it up yesterday, so we'll see how that plant in particular does. I think the other one should be fine because they're potted quite normally. But underneath, you can see there's the 4 separate sections. The dry sides have just dry sphagnum moss, just for a little bit of insulation and give them something to hide under for further security if they want it. And the wet sides have a soil mixture, which I typically use to plant vivariums, which is basically sand, cocoa fiber, and potting soil mixed together in a ratio that I feel like is appropriate. I can't say exactly what it is because I sort of just freehand it until it feels right. And that's what that is. You can sort of see a little sneak peek. You can see my Ninja Turtle pajamas, but you can also see a little sneak peek of a couple other features that I have in here. But importantly, I wanted to see what was going on inside. So a lot of people who build these false bottom hides, and they build, sorry, my finger's in the way, and build these hides, it's great, you know, it offers the geckos a lot of security, but it also sort of kills some of the joy of what I think animal keepers uniquely get, which is sort of viewing behaviors and viewing animals in situations that you wouldn't necessarily get to see in a wild situation. Top view, aerial view if you want that. So I wanted to be able to view the animals in their hide in the dark when it's not in day, just to see what they're doing. Maybe they're laying eggs, maybe they're shedding, whatever. I just wanted kind of the ability to see what's going on. So what I did, and you can see because I pulled some wires out there, is I wired PC strip LEDs into the top. And so this is like a plastic sort of construction material that I did for the very base that covers these, you know, 4 hides to avoid moisture getting to the actual wiring and LED strips there. And then on top of that is basically foam board, which I, you know, cut and formed in such a way that you can layer the LEDs between the two and then stack. You can sort of see a couple layers of foam board there, and then silicone that. Okay, back at it again. So yeah, like I was saying, I wanted to install the LEDs so I can observe some kind of unique gecko-y subterranean behavior, things that I think a lot of people, you know, definitely people who don't own the species, but even people who do, don't necessarily get the privilege or opportunity to observe based on their enclosures, or, you know, in the case of people who don't keep them, the lack of exposure they have to the animals. But anyhow, yeah, having the LEDs, you can sort of see inside the hides just from the natural light on the thing, but through the tunnels on top. But having the LEDs gives you the unique opportunity to view, you know, some finer behavior, stuff that you might miss without this setup. So I'm gonna turn on these hides. I don't know if you can see, I'll zoom in right there. That little square dingly dungly, that's a sensor that is tucked away against the silicone on the back of the enclosure, poking up through the bottom of the hide. That lets me remotely turn on and control things like the color and brightness of the LED lights from outside. So I'll do that. There you go. So right now, the normal sort of nighttime viewing experience I think will be red, even though during the evening I won't be leaving the lights on, so they'll be on only when I'm observing them. And then during the day I'm installing these little foam board black covers to put over the portholes, the viewing ports, so that they can feel secure in their hides when I'm not watching them. So that's cool. So again, you get this opportunity to view them doing things when they're feeling completely secure. And I feel like no matter what, the presence of, you know, no matter how conditioned your animals are to you, the presence of you, I think alters their behavior. So if you remove yourself from the equation entirely, I think you'll get to observe some kind of neat stuff, I hope. We'll see. You know, thermoregulating at a bare minimum, but, you know, shedding behavior and egg-laying behavior, picking nest spots and watching them dig and all that fun stuff is all within reach now. And again, so if you want purely observational, say you're not worried about the security of the animal and you want more to say, see if your animal has a problem, maybe there's something that you suspect and you want to confirm, you can change the color of the light. So it is white, and it's nice and bright in there. You can easily observe your geckos in that situation if you're worried about anything. As you can see, it condenses, right? This is the warm side, especially, and the soil is moist, so it will condense and block your view through these ports. I had anticipated that a bit, so what I basically did, which is similar to what I see a lot of aquarium people do for cleaning their tanks without having to reach their hands inside, is bought some neodymium magnets. And on the opposite side, you can just see that line there. There are plastic neodymium magnets that I siliconed like sort of the scratch pad of a dishwashing sponge onto, so that when that does fog up and condense, you can just clean it off with a magnet like that. So, and again, give you a clear view of what's going on with your geckos. I had just cleaned this, so it's actually not that condensed, so the effect isn't very dramatic, but trust me, it does help quite a bit. Yeah, so besides the LEDs, I'll switch those off now. There's not a ton to talk about. That's pretty much the enclosure. You know, all this is foamed in. The rocks are loose and just there to give more of a natural effect. And I haven't introduced the geckos yet to it, so I'll film me putting one in, but I want to do a slow introduction as to not, you know, stress them out beyond a new enclosure, also reintroducing them to their colony mates all at once. I'll just do a slow introduction, let them get used to this one at a time, and then build up the colony again that way. Yeah, I hope to observe some pretty unique behavior. If you guys have any questions about construction, which I am kicking myself for not taking any pictures or videos of me building the actual vivarium, but if you do have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Sorry, my camera bugged out for a second there, but yeah, so the element in the construction of the actual tank that probably required the most thought was the top, because you need it to be removable, but you also need it to be flush, sort of with the back and sides, and the non-removable part of the enclosure, not only to maintain humidity within the hide so you're not constantly having to replenish, and because that humidity could potentially affect the electronics that are in the tank, but also just to give it sort of a nice flow, you know, especially from certain angles you really can't even tell that there is a removable top in there, like I said before. And I wanted that. I didn't want any big visual breaks that take you out of what would otherwise look like a natural environment. And so to achieve that, basically I couldn't have built any sort of background, which is what you typically see in these sort of like fake natural deserty setups, is people build these epic, you know, rock backgrounds and stuff, which I think has its own appeal, has its own charm, but is not necessarily most conducive for, you know, a natural look. Yeah, so without doing that, I needed to have it still be flush up against the back of the cage. And to achieve it, I basically painters taped on some cellophane wrap, like kitchen cling wrap, you know, onto the back and around all the sides of the enclosure, so that when the lid was on, I was able to foam the top, you know, as much as I desired, and that foam expanded and formed a good seal with the sides. And then after it dried, I was able to, you know, peel the tape off and the cellophane off, and you achieve a flush background just as you would if you foamed and silicone directly onto the back of the glass. And similarly here, you get more, you know, you can still clearly see that line, but you get more of a flush look than you would normally, simply because I cellophaned from the inside of this down, you know, the hill, and then that way when I grate stuffed the top, it was able to expand over the contours of the hill that were already there, and in that way create a relatively flush seal along that as well. Yeah, so some interesting construction solutions. If I, you know, didn't mention something that you're curious about, like I said before, feel free to ask, and I will definitely get back to you if I can. You know, some of these things just sort of happen, but yeah, if I can help you in any way, I'll be more than happy to do it. Hope y'all enjoy. I will now throw a gecko in, and, you know, we'll spend the last couple seconds of this video just watching them crawl around and explore for the first time. Cool, I'll go grab a gecko. All right, here we go. She's like, what the heck is going on? Before, they were set up in, you know, the more traditional plastic tubs with the heated bottoms, just for convenience of space and stuff. But I've wanted to do a big colony situation in a big natural setup, because I'm used to doing the tropical vivariums for more arboreal geckos. But in New Zealand, you have very little access to them, so I still wanted to get into my vivarium building, but had to choose a species that is accessible to the pet industry here. In New Zealand, there are very few, as far as geckos go, that are non-native, that you don't have to go through the government to legally keep. Leopard geckos are pretty much it. So that dictated the direction I went with this build. But this would all be pretty novel to her, as it will be for all the other geckos as well. Giving everything a taste, as leopard geckos do. It'll be interesting to see how easily they find their hides. She's creeping up on one right now. Just for a sense of scale, it's actually, I'm not sure of the actual dimensions. I bought this used aquarium on Trade Me, which is basically the Kiwi equivalent of like a Craigslist or eBay. So it's a used fish aquarium that I converted for this purpose. So I don't actually know how big it is, but it's quite large. Probably 75, 80 gallons, something like that. Anyhow, I'll let her settle in. hope y'all enjoyed. Hopefully I'll be back at it again with another vivarium or some other project. I like my projects. Have a great one, guys.